On the GED RLA test, you'll be asked to read different types of texts and answer questions about them. These texts usually fall into two categories: literary and informational. Understanding the difference is crucial because each type has different features, purposes, and types of questions. This lesson will help you quickly recognize each type and analyze them effectively for the GED. Let's take a moment to understand what literary texts are and how to approach them on the GED. To begin, literary texts are fictional or imaginative works. They include short stories, novels, plays, poems. Next, literary texts often contain several key elements. First, they use characters, plot, and setting. Then, they typically have an emotional tone or theme. In addition, they often use figurative language, such as metaphors and similes. Overall, the focus is on entertainment, expression, or the exploration of human experience. Common literary devices. In addition, authors use various devices to enrich their writing. Imagery appeals to the senses. Dialogue reveals character and drives plot. Theme, the central message or insight. Tone, the author's attitude toward the subject. GED tips. Finally, when answering GED questions on literary texts, look for character motivations and development. Identify conflict, internal or external. Focus on inference-based questions, what can be understood but isn't directly stated. Now let's shift our focus to another important text type you'll see on the GED, informational texts. These are very different from literary texts and require a different reading strategy. To begin with, informational texts are nonfiction and written to inform, explain, or argue. These include news articles, essays, reports, historical documents. Next, informational texts usually have the following features. First, they are factual and objective. Second, they're structured with headings, subheadings, and paragraphs. Additionally, they often include data, examples, or quotes from experts. Text structures. Furthermore, informational texts are often organized using specific patterns: cause and effect, compare and contrast, problem and solution, chronological order. GED tips. Finally, when answering GED questions based on informational texts, identify the central idea and supporting details. Understand the author's purpose, e.g. to inform, persuade. Look for evidence such as facts, statistics, and examples. To succeed on the GED reading section, you must know how literary and informational texts differ. Let's go over the most important contrasts, one by one. Purpose. In literary texts, the purpose is typically to entertain, express emotion, or explore human experiences. By contrast, informational texts aim to inform, explain, or argue a point using facts. Language style. When it comes to literary language, it tends to be figurative and expressive, for example, using metaphors or vivid imagery. On the other hand, informational writing uses clear, direct, and objective language to get the point across. Structure. Literary texts usually follow a flexible structure, often built around a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. In contrast, informational texts are more formally organized, using headings, subheadings, and structured paragraphs. Use of evidence. In literary works, the emphasis is on storytelling, character development, and setting, not on factual data. Meanwhile, informational texts rely heavily on statistics, data, and expert quotes to support their ideas. GED focus. On the GED, literary passages often bring up questions about theme, tone, character development, and conflict. In comparison, informational passages focus on identifying the main idea, understanding the structure, and analyzing the strength of arguments or evidence used. To boost your reading score on the GED, it helps to quickly identify the type of passage you're dealing with. Here's how you can do that effectively. First, read the blurb or title before anything else. This helps you predict whether the passage is literary or informational. Next, scan the text's structure. Headings, subheadings, or transitional phrases like "in conclusion" or "for example" are strong clues that you're looking at an informational text. Then, pay attention to tone and word choice. If the language feels emotional, descriptive, or creative, you're likely reading a literary piece. In contrast, a neutral or academic tone usually signals informational writing. When working with literary texts, prepare to answer questions about theme, character behavior, and mood. But if the passage is informational, shift your focus to identifying the main claim, evaluating logic, and understanding how the argument is structured. Before you move on, let's quickly review the key takeaways from this lesson. Literary texts focus on storytelling and human emotion. Informational texts deliver facts, analysis, or explanations. GED questions will differ based on the text type, so you must recognize which you're reading. Knowing these differences helps you predict question types and choose answers more accurately. By mastering this distinction, you'll be better equipped to analyze passages quickly and answer GED RLA questions with confidence.